Hi, this is Mike Durbin with MyDiabeticHeart.com. I'm here today at the ADA's camp, John Warvel, in North Webster, Indiana, and have the opportunity to sit down and talk with Olympic cross-country skier Kris Freeman. And he's been kind enough to sit down and answer some questions for us, and here he is.
Hello.
Okay, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your diagnosis, when you were diagnosed, and how.
Okay. Well, I grew up in Andover, New Hampshire, and I've been skiing my whole life. My father pulled me in a sled when I was a baby. I did my first ski race when I was 5. I won the New Hampshire high school state meet in cross-country skiing when I was in 8th grade.
Okay.
So I had very successful results all along, and I earned a scholarship to the University of Vermont. But after 1 year, I got an invitation to travel to Park City, Utah, and train full-time with the U.S. Olympic team.
Okay.
At the Olympic, that was 1999, and the Olympics were in 2002. So I moved out there. I gave up the scholarship to train full-time. And about 2 months after I got there, I got the very familiar symptoms that everyone with diabetes has experienced: blurry vision, going to the bathroom frequently, lightheadedness. I dismissed them. Initially, I was training harder than I ever had been. I was going on mountain runs and lifting weights and training harder than I ever had. So it was easy to rationalize what was happening. But I was lucky in that the ski team gives a blood test about every 6 weeks when we're training to make sure we're absorbing things properly. That,
Okay.
Our iron levels are right, that our cholesterol levels are right, because there's no reason in training the body excessively hard if it's not ready for it.
Right.
But they did a glucose test and it came back at 260. That was obviously a red flag. I had no idea what it meant. I was just told that I needed to see an endocrinologist, which I had no idea what was. I saw him the next day and he diagnosed me within 5 minutes. Just pricked my finger, looked at me and said, "Yeah, you got type 1 diabetes." And the message I got that day was that no one had ever competed in an endurance sport before at the Olympic level, so that my aspirations were no longer really realistic, and that I should set my sights lower, which I had absolutely no interest in doing.
Very good. Very good. Now, as far as your treatment regimen goes, are you on daily injections? Are you a pumper?
I am a pumper. I use the Omnipod insulin pump.
Okay.
I pump Humalog insulin with it 24/7, and I cater the dose, change the dose to what my activity level is, what my location is. I travel the entire world racing, and so I've definitely found that I have different insulin sensitivity at different elevations.
Okay.
Foods change from country to country.
Right.
So I keep a log of what has worked for me in the past at these locations, because I basically go to the same ones to race every year. And this was the basal rate I used last year, so I have a good starting point that way. For activity level, when I've been training a lot, my insulin can go down 100%, 50%. It can go down crazy amounts when I'm training 6 hours a day versus a recovery day where I'm sitting on the couch. So I just have to be constantly aware and constantly changing things.
Okay. Now, that actually answered a couple of different questions that I had anyway. So, as far as your diet goes, what types of changes and things have you made?
One of the first things I really learned about and really found helpful was I definitely am a believer in the glycemic index.
Okay.
I studied that chart, figured out which foods were what, and the timing of what I eat is very important.
Right.
Obviously, when I'm working out, I eat high glycemic foods, but when I'm not, I eat low glycemic foods for a more sustained energy. I've found that the closer I eat foods to their natural form, the easier it is to control that. Food was created in a way that our bodies were designed to process it, and so it's much easier to. I use the example. It's much easier for me to figure out how to balance eating an orange as opposed to eating orange juice, simply because when you make juice out of an orange, you strip all the fiber out of it,
Right.
and that fiber would slow the absorption of the food. Obviously, both is a healthy choice, and both is it is worthy of eating, but at different times for me.
Okay. Now, I read the press release that Lily sent out. I was reading about the muscle disorder that you overcame. Now, I read that wasn't as a part of your diabetes. No, we're fine. But I read that wasn't a part of your diabetes, or because of that itself. But as someone who lives with multiple health conditions, I know that every other little thing can impact how you manage your diabetes. Now, how did that impact how you managed during that time?
Well, the surgery, what I had was called compartment syndrome. And what that is from repetitive movements. Your muscle can actually outgrow its fascia, or its protective sheath.
Right.
And that is an impliable, inflexible covering.
Right.
So my muscle actually outgrew that covering in my lower leg.
Okay.
And so what the doctor did is he went in and he removed 50% of the fascia.
Okay.
You actually, according to my doctor, don't need your fascia, and I hope he's right.
Okay.
Now it's not an incredibly dangerous procedure or anything, but it is extremely painful. I mean, obviously you're stripping a covering off your muscle. The recovery time was a long time. I couldn't walk for quite some time, which certainly had an impact on how I was treating my diabetes.
Exactly.
So, currently when I'm training really hard, I'm eating over 4,000 calories a day to sustain that effort.
Okay.
When I was recovering, I was down at 2,000 calories a day and eating extremely low glycemic foods in order to, I knew that the better I kept my blood sugar under control, the faster I was going to heal, the faster I was going to get back to what I wanted to do.
Right. Okay. Now, had somebody pose a question. I posted that I was going to be interviewing you. I had several people actually post questions that they thought I should ask.
Okay.
And one of the questions that I got was, when you're skiing and you can't test your blood sugars, how do you know when to push yourself or when you need to stop?
Well, what I do, because the races are so close at the Olympic level, the World Championship level, I always use the example of in 2009 I finished 4th at the World Championships in a 9-mile race, and I was a second from third, 10 seconds from the win. So obviously if I stopped for 30 seconds, checked my blood sugar, I'd be out of the race.
Right.
So in order to combat that, I do practice races throughout the year to learn how my body reacts to different stress loads as I go on. There's a treadmill in Park City, Utah that I've utilized that you can actually roller ski on it, simulate it, and so they can hook me up to, they can see how much oxygen I'm using, what my lactate levels are in my muscles, what my glucose is, and so I have a very good idea of how much carbohydrate I'm burning through, how long I can go at a sustained rate. Mainly it's the practice of it. And from doing that practice over and over again, I just have the basal rate planned. And this past season, I really didn't have any mishaps. I mean, I had a couple of races where I finished in the 240s, which were obviously too high, but nothing detrimental. For the most part, I was finishing in the 150 range.
Okay. Now, do you deal with hypo-unawareness at all?
I don't deal with hypo-unawareness, and the reason is I'm hyper vigilant about not going there. And from what I understand, the more you go hypo, the less you can feel it.
Right.
So as soon as my blood sugar gets under 60 or 50, I know it. I can feel it. I get the shakes. I get the sweats, and I don't want to become hypervigilant. So I'm just very careful about that.
Okay. Now, have you dealt, obviously, being diagnosed with diabetes or anything like that can be rather traumatic and whatnot, and there's definitely a big mental health issue component to the disease. Have you dealt much with things like depression or anxiety and things because of the disease, and how have you dealt with that, if
Well, for sure, there's an obvious adjustment period to having diabetes. Everyone goes through, at least a minor depression, if not a major one. You have anger, you have acceptance, denial. Everything comes into play. And I certainly had a denial phase, but at the same time, I am so hyper aware that my body is my instrument that even though I was in denial with myself, I was doing everything the doctor told me to, because I knew that I did not want to damage anything. 0.5% off and I'm out. And as far as depression, there's certainly been some very frustrating moments. I'm lucky in that part of being on the U.S. ski team is working with a sports psychologist. So right from the beginning, I was able to vent and able to get some. And I didn't have to go and seek out the treatment. The treatment came to me.
Okay.
So the depression never really manifested.
Okay.
But for sure, coming in from a hard workout and watching your teammates pound a quart of Gatorade and you're sitting there testing your blood sugar and a little high, gonna wait. You definitely can feel those things.
Okay.
But as the more time goes on, the more you just get used to it.
Now, as far as lows go, a little more fun questions and whatnot. What are some of your favorite things to use to treat a low?
It depends. It depends what's handy. But if I'm going on a long car drive or anything like that, I almost always have a sport drink handy. I generally use Power Bar products for it. That's a large reason is I get them free.
Okay.
They've been a great sponsor for me over the years. I like eating them, so and those are generally what's handy. And you still feel like an athlete when you're eating Power Bar products.
Okay. Now, as far as a pre-workout type snack, what would you say?
It depends on the time. If I'm going to eat, a pre-workout would definitely be a higher glycemic index, easier to digest type food, like a Power Bar or like a fruit smoothie or something like that. If a meal that I would eat, generally I would consume a meal 3 hours before going out for a workout, so that any bolus insulin that I took would be totally out of the system by the time I start working out. If I have any residual insulin in the system, I tend to go low, and then I have to consume more carbohydrates than I would prefer.
Right. Okay. You use glucose tabs at all?
I actually just use Power Bar products.
Okay.
I actually travel. I think for me, it's important to travel with a food source like that, where it's so consistent and the food is so just repeatable.
Okay.
It's like I eat a bar, it's 45 grams of carbohydrate. I know that. It's got 10 grams of protein in it. I know that. It's got 6 grams of fiber. I know that. And you're traveling through China and you get a plate of food and you can't identify anything about it. How do you bolus for it?
Right. Okay. Now, being here at the camp, obviously close to 100 of the kids that are here this year are newly diagnosed kids. And just wondering, what advice would you give to anybody, especially kids this age, who are just diagnosed and getting started?
Well, the initial reaction I had when I was diagnosed was fear. And I think fear comes from not knowing what's happening. So my advice is to learn as much as you can about the disease. Learn as much about treating it yourself, and because the more you understand it, the less scary it is. If you don't understand why something's happening inside you, then it's terrifying. But if you can come up with a reason why, then it's much more calming. I've learned a lot about physiology simply because that's what I needed to learn to continue going on with the sport. And so I definitely stress education, and I also try to stress not getting angry, not getting mad at yourself when you mess up with your treatment. That you just move on from it and learn from it the next day. That every day gets easier if you learn something the day before.
Any final thoughts? Closing?
I think that's about it.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Kris, for your time. I appreciate you sitting down.
You're welcome.
Very nice to meet you. Thank you.